Hello, I'm Chuck Martin, and this is the IoT World Today podcast. With me today is Art Miller, Global Head of Retail IoT at Qualcomm Technologies. Art has been a hardware engineer at Motorola, project engineer at Qualcomm, and senior director engineering at Kyocera Wireless Corporation. At Qualcomm, Art leads the Internet of Things business unit, focusing on the technologies that fuel the digitization and efficiency of physical retail experiences. Welcome here, Art.
Thanks for having me. Certainly appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
So you're living in the future world of retail. I wonder if you could tell what that looks like these days.
Sure. Yeah, we're not just we're kind of focusing on the current state of retail and looking into the future. But actually, a lot of the technology to enable the future is here today. So some of the things we're looking at is more focusing on experience, talking about how technology can enhance a consumer's experience, an associate's experience, or potentially even help with operational efficiencies. So, we're at Qualcomm we have a massive technology portfolio. We think technology all day, but now we're trying to figure out how can we use that to help improve experience in shopping. So we're looking in areas where there's going to be this to create experiences that are relevant and meaningful. So just like your online experiences today, when you're shopping in line, you get relevant recommendations while you're shopping in real time. You may add that to your cart. There's no reason once you digitize retail that you couldn't have a similar experience in a physical space. If the edge is digitized, we know where things are, we know where you are, and we know how you're behaving. Maybe what you would like to do. We could potentially create this this online experience in physical space using technology, and it's only to be meaningful though. It's not technology for technology's sake. It shouldn't be obtrusive. It should help us. So we're looking at everything from robots and augmented reality glasses, or even virtual reality glasses, looking at the digitizing the shelf edge so that there's more meaningful information as you interact with it, or the ability to dynamically modify pricing or ads to people as they're shopping. And then, as you go through the store, and I can speak to more experiences, but consumers, we have different expectations, each of us. And it's how do you cater to each consumer as they go through? Maybe it's the checkout process. How do you make sure there's multiple modalities at the front that make people happy? Not everyone wants to go through self-checkout. Not everyone is comfortable with full technology implementations of retail. Some still want to go to an attended lane. There's no reason that technology can't enable all of those different experiences or expectations from a consumer perspective.
So where does a retailer start with this? I mean, that's a large menu of options.
Sure. Yeah, the funny thing is, retailers are already embracing some of this. If the very simple, if they've been in aisle for some time, when you're going through a store and you want to do your own price check, there's some price checkers, right? You don't have to find an associate. You could maybe check the price at the end of the aisle. That's technology in retail that we're already experiencing today. Or if you look at the ability for the associate to find something on your behalf, that's the industrial handheld today. So there's those, but we're talking about how do you digitize the shelf. So when we speak with retailers, we're saying, hey, we can enable, as Qualcomm, with our vast portfolio and our 13,000 partners, we can enable any experience you'd like, but where do you want to start? And let's not talk technology, let's talk experience. So if someone comes in and says, I want help solving loss prevention, or I want help, tracking people through the store, or just simply, with COVID going on, I want to make sure everyone's wearing their mask when they enter the store. So we like to talk with retailers at that point, and then we will bring in relevant technology or partners to enable that for them. So I know it's a little overwhelming on how each of these things can interact, but we're in a unique position where we can stand back and look at, based on the use case they're trying to solve, how all of the technologies can work together. We're not in there just trying to sell, one niche application. We can look more broadly on how all of these things can enable a broader experience and a better experience for everyone.
So is a retailer looking for things to basically that are customer facing, or are they looking at things that are more back end facing, where they want to organize their data so they can actually look at say traffic flow using sensors, that sort of thing? Or are they actually looking for the individual one-to-one experience with a customer?
Sure. To be honest with you, they're looking at both. And that's why, we're always constantly talking about these three pillars. There's the customer experience, there's the associate experience, and then there's operational efficiency and technologies to enable each of those. Because, the happy customer with no associates, is maybe not the best thing, or, associates that are happy and the customer's dissatisfied is probably not good either. So we're talking about all three. Some of the things on the back end, it's simply knowing where is my stuff. It's now that you and I are potentially ordering online and they have to send someone out to pick that order. It's very important that supply chain, more important than ever, that we know where everything is in the supply chain. Is it in the store? Is it on the shelf? Is it in a truck heading to the store? So back end efficiencies, it's knowing where things are. Front end, or not front end, but in the store, it's more about how do we interact in a digital manner with the associate or with the customer. So the customer and the associate often benefit from the same technologies in store, but we are looking at back end efficiencies, or even going into distribution centers, but more supply chain. So technology and physical space, digitizing the edge, and creating kind of this view of where everything is all the time, so then we can stitch it together.
So in connected retail, where's the initial payback for a retailer? Because they're all looking at the bottom line, obviously.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, they're operating on very thin margins. So ROI. There's some interesting things coming forward today. A few years ago, we were talking about electronic shelf labels. So e-ink shelf edge labels instead of paper labels, and it may not have made sense a few years ago to automate pricing. We talked to retailers and say, technology is expensive, labor's cheap, my prices don't change that often. Now with COVID, prices have gone up. The finding labor to work is difficult, and if they are working, they're getting paid more. So this ROI, let's say simply for price changes, may have changed over time. But then there's this other dynamic that comes in. The associate in the store is now responsible for picking on our behalf, a job we used to do for free. So they need to be efficient. So a simple thing is like the electronic shelf label at the shelf edge, digitizing the shelf edge now solves your ROI of the frequency of price changes, because in e-com, things change much more quickly than they do in physical space. So now you can keep up with that. You now solve if you have a shortage in labor, now your labor's helping customers and helping to sell instead of changing price labels. And at the same time, you have the opportunity to interact with the consumer at the shelf edge. So when you start looking at which ROIs make sense, that's one we've seen that people are very interested in. Loss prevention at front of store is another one that technology to make sure, as we have people do more of the front end themselves, either in a true frictionless shopping experience, just walk out type scenario, or with self-checkout, making sure, hey, you solved one problem, it just created another problem. It's being able to detect intentional or inadvertent loss at the front end of the store. So those are a couple things that are very interesting. Think picking efficiency or pricing automation or loss prevention in a store. Those are some that directly improve operational efficiency and help directly add to the bottom line and offset some headwinds based on trends.
So some of the things you're talking about is really efficiency for the retailer in this environment. Is it more about basically saving money by doing a lot of those efficiency kinds of things, or is it by increasing revenue by having better engagement with consumers and maybe causing some upsell?
Sure. I guess there's the benefit of both, right? Because once you have the ability to interact with customer, you potentially can increase basket size. So there's an uplift in revenue. The second thing is, if you can have better views of in-store, let's say out of stock, you may end up, if something goes out of stock, for instance, you can shift over and provide different information. So now someone can order that online, have it delivered to their home. So taking care of the abandoned basket scenario. Someone came for a very specific item, it's not there, they leave the store. So there's potentials right there to save revenue and increase revenue. But at the same time, when you automate pricing or automate the front end of the store, now you have some operational efficiencies. So certain technologies are hitting both sides of that coin when you deploy it.
When customers come into a store, are they expecting this now? Just because because the online experience they've been having during COVID the last couple of years, a lot of people have had to learn how to do things online from a shopping standpoint. Do they have different expectations at the physical store?
I think they do. Certainly, when we start talking about the physical store, we'll include the outside of store. Just, I wouldn't never have thought of ordering stuff and then picking it up curbside. Now, many people do, or picking up in a locker or doing something else. So, some of our behaviors during COVID have kind of led to retailers having to provide these experiences. So it all, and then at the same time, I don't know if you've done it. I've been in a store. I see a price on a shelf. I instantly check the price on my phone. That's an online behavior, right? Where we might check multiple websites to make sure we're getting the best price. In physical space, we might check. Now we're checking e-tailers against physical commerce. So if those pricing, that the price does not line up, it's more expensive in the store at the shelf, but it's cheaper in e-com. We're going to go an e-com route. So it's very important that those the physical retailers have the ability to keep up with that dynamic or that comparative type interaction with the consumer. And then digitizing the shelf edge allows the consumer to get the same amount of information out of the shelf edge as it would if they were doing their own online searching. So it's, our expectations have changed with e-commerce. They've again changed based on COVID behaviors. And I think you'll see a lot of that stay. I don't think all of it's bad, but we've become accustomed to certain things. The retailers are going to have to, the physical retailers will have to accommodate that.
Is one of the drivers basically cost? Because we've been looking at dynamic pricing on shelving for years at the National Retail Federation meetings, and in the earlier years it was basically too expensive. But now that it's at scale, does it have some kind of a tipping point where retailers say now it's time?
Yeah, and I think that's part of the benefits of the benefits of COVID have driven the need for some technologies. And I think you're right. I think we're at a point in time where we're very near tipping point. The technology pricing has come down. Again, I'm going back to the multiple ROI at the shelf edge. So it's no longer used just for pricing. It's used to help make picking more efficient. So maybe there's the ability for someone wearing XR glasses picking to look over and see what they're supposed to pick, or knowing as the associate navigates to the store, we anticipate them being near and start flashing an LED on the actual item they're supposed to pick. So making the picking more efficient. So there's a couple ROIs that go in to justifying that technology. Not only has the technology gotten cheaper, but now the need for it is in multiple places to help efficiency. And then, lastly is, I think the big thing, there's been some hesitancy from some retailers to buy proprietary implementations of technology. I think as more people, especially someone like Qualcomm, we're big proponents of standards. We invest heavily in standards. Now we're engaged with retailers and say, hey, can we standardize the technology? Can we standardize the air interface, how you communicate with that technology in the store? So I think that last piece of saying, hey, we're going to standardize stuff for you. We announced publicly a partnership with SCS and Magitech. They lead in that electronic shelf label space. We announced something some time ago. But when you start looking at, can you standardize something? Now the CIO, he's maybe not so worried about making the wrong decision anymore on technology, knowing that he's not betting on something proprietary. He doesn't have to deploy another overlay network of some air interface to talk to things at the shelf edge. So I think there's a lot going on. There's the cost technology, there's additional use cases, and then there's this, if there's ability with someone like Qualcomm to come in and help standardize certain parts of retail, there's less risk in making the wrong decision. So I think all of these have us right at that tipping point, and I think you'll see a lot of big changes over the next few years.
So at the recent NRF National Retail Federation meeting in New York, what was retailers asking about? What are they looking for that's not around yet?
Well, it's funny. everything's around. It's just how they're asking for it's a little different, right? Because I think there's more focus on experience, more focus on efficiency than there has been in the past. So, some things that I saw, at least in our booth, that folks were interested in, the better use of biometrics, whether that's biometrics to have to pay, to recognize someone, maybe a rewards program. But we showed a face payment technology. We also showed a palm reading technology to authenticate a user. Those we had a lot of interest in. Now, obviously, there's always concerns around opt-in and privacy, but when you start looking at different features than your face to authenticate someone, the guard comes down a little bit. And then that's one. We see obviously a big trend in AI, everything to do with AI or modeling. How is someone going through the store? How is someone behaving? How do we engage people at the edge to make relevant recommendations? I think that's going to be a big thing. And then lots of talk around supply chain. Again, I mentioned it earlier, knowing where my stuff is. So, we have a few projects going on. We've been heavily engaged, Qualcomm has, in keeping track of where things are for decades. Now we're getting into conversations with retailers on how do we close that gap between what they know and what they would like to know about where things are. So, I'd say number one is always about experience. I see trends. I think biometrics will play a much greater role. AI will continue to gain in its role in both back and front of store. And then, how do we fix some of these supply chain? As supply chain remains constrained and things become more expensive, it's how do we know exactly where things are all the time is going to be a big deal.
So if we have this conversation about connected retail a year from now, what will we be talking about?
The hope is we're talking about some of the deployments that people have deployed technology to enable the experiences we're talking about today. Some of the experiences, and like I said, we're at that tipping point. Maybe we can point to a few, but I think you'll continue to see AI and robotics play a bigger role in future stuff. I think you'll start to see maybe folks talking about how do you deal with retail physical space? Do we automate portions? Do we create experiences in other portions of the store? Those I think reconfiguring retail. And at the same time, it's really, really close to people truly having a frictionless experience or an unattended experience in retail is becoming a bigger deal. That falls more into the AI category, enabling that experience. So I think all of those are you'll see. I would like to talk about things we have done, kind of the low-hanging fruit, and then longer term see more proof of concepts or people we can point to that are doing some of the more advanced use cases we're discussing today.
Thank you. Great stuff, Art. And thank you all for listening to the IoT World Today podcast.